All of these private meetings, strange remarks about Tom and giddy bridesmaids, there was an impending event. And I sensed that it would be something significant because Amy loves pulling practical jokes. I simply didn't anticipate it to be that way. In hindsight, perhaps I ought to have simply addressed her. Perhaps I ought to have canceled the wedding at that time. So I saw Amy chuckle at whatever Tom was saying and called him. I need your aid, dude. Amy is probably planning something for the wedding, and I don't think it will work out. After a minute of silence, Mike said, "Come to my office now." I will always remember sitting in his opulent office and listening to everything he had to say. After I was done, he gave me a serious look and said, "We need insurance." After that, he took out this legal pad and began writing. "Look," he said, "I can't stop her from doing whatever she's planning, but if she does try anything, we can make sure she regrets it." We drafted this utterly phony prenuptial agreement in his office for about 4 hours. Although it looks very official, Mike claimed it wouldn't stand up in court for even 5 minutes. Contained a lot of legal jargon that I couldn't even comprehend. This particular provision regarding public humiliation was crucial. On my phone, I still have a picture of it. All jointly arranged financial commitments shall be instantly void, and the offending party will be required to publicly apologize if either party intentionally embarrasses or degrades the other party in public prior to the signing of this contract. In order to make it appear like one of those 50-page contracts that no one ever reads, Mike even included some fictitious case law references, along with all these intricate definitions of what constitutes financial responsibility and public humiliation. The finest aspect. To make it appear more official, he had his secretary notarize it and place this official-looking stamp on it. Amy would simply sign anything that was placed in front of her. She also acknowledged that she had never read the contract for her own apartment. She wouldn't be able to tell it was phony, Mike remarked. I gave the prenuptial agreement to my best man Dan to keep in this black folder. Just in case, I advised him to carry it with him to the wedding. I felt somewhat bad because Dan, who has known me since we were children, could sense how anxious I was the entire time we were doing this, even if he thought I was being paranoid. As if I could have gone too far. Perhaps I was simply being suspicious. However, I would recall that Amy continued to see Tom behind my back, to lie about her plans, and to act strangely among her bridesmaids. And unless anything came up at the wedding, I had no intention of using it. One day, my coworker Jen, who was a bridesmaid, showed up at my workplace, looking quite anxious. She began to talk about how she was unable to remain silent any longer. Amy, however, made a phone call at that very time. Jen's expression at seeing Amy's name appear. Whatever was coming, I knew it was bad. Additionally, I began to notice more things about the house. In the bathroom, while the shower was running, Amy began making these lengthy phone calls. She quickly shut down her laptop. She was erasing text messages while she thought I was sleeping, according to the one occasion I entered the room. The strange part was that she occasionally showed additional kindness as well. For example, suggesting that we watch my favorite movies or bringing home my favorite takeaway at random. In hindsight, I believe she was experiencing guilt. Or perhaps she was only attempting to confuse me. I'm not sure. I recall sitting at my parents' house the night before the wedding. Amy requested that we avoid meeting one another before to the wedding. There was a part of me that hoped I would never have to utilize the black folder with the prenuptial agreement. As if I were mistaken about everything. Perhaps Amy was only preparing a ridiculous surprise. I was glancing at the binder when my mother came in. She could sense something wasn't right, but she didn't know what was in it. "You know, if you're not sure, you don't have to go through with this," she remarked as she sat down next to me. I just assured her that everything was well. That evening, I instructed Dan to keep the folder near throughout the ceremony and placed it in his luggage. Neither of us was laughing when he joked that it was like in the movies when someone always objections at the wedding. I kept thinking about the folder while I was getting dressed the following morning, hoping I would need it, but yet felt strangely at ease knowing it was there in case. In fact, the wedding morning was ideal, as in strangely ideal. Everything about the location was stunning. Amy made sure every decoration was just the way she wanted it. I kept wondering that perhaps I was mistaken about everything when I was getting ready with my groomsmen. Perhaps I was simply being suspicious. My best man Dan was constantly examining the folder as if it were his job. Every few minutes, he would check on his suitcase to make sure it was still there. He was so scared that my other guys were making fun of him, assuming he was looking for the rings. Even before the ceremony began, my mother was in tears. Happy tears, she thought. My tie was good, but my dad kept straightening it. In hindsight, I believe they both recognized something was wrong, but chose not to speak out. I recall seeing everyone take their seats while I stood at the altar. Amy's bridesmaids were whispering to one another and laughing. Everyone except Jen, who appeared to be on the verge of vomiting. She refused to give me a glance. Everyone sprang to their feet as soon as the music began to play. To be honest, Amy looked stunning as she and her father entered. Actually, everything was flawless, which only made the subsequent events worse. The ceremony began as usual. The priest went about his business, discussing commitment, love, and other such topics. In fact, I was beginning to feel foolish about carrying that prenuptial agreement in Dan's suitcase. Then, just before we were to exchange vows, we reached the vows. Amy did something where she took the priest's microphone. He was really perplexed, but she simply smiled broadly and told him not to worry. Then, as if presenting a game show or something, she says, beaming, "I have a small surprise planned for my amazing soon-to-be hubby." My stomach fell. Dan quickly placed his hand on the folder in his backpack. My dad straightened up in his chair, and I noticed it. With a broad smile, Amy turns to address each of our visitors and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the true love of my life." As if he were in a movie or something, the guy Tom enters the venue through the open doors at the rear. While everyone is turning around in their seats trying to figure out what's going on, he's just walking down the aisle with this dumb smile on his face. You could hear my mother's gasp from the other side of the room. In fact, my sister got to her feet as if she were about to fight. "Oh no!" quite loudly exclaimed one of my aunts. Amy wasn't finished, though. She is grinning as if she had just received a prize or something, and she begins to talk about how she couldn't say "I do" without first getting Tom's approval, because he played such a significant role in her life, and they had been chatting a lot recently. Then, like we're pals or something, this moron named Tom approaches the altar and gives me a back pat. I wanted to knock him out for the smile he's wearing. The majority of the bridesmaids are laughing as if this is the most hilarious thing they have ever witnessed. The priest seemed to wish to vanish. Now Jen is truly weeping with tears streaming down her cheeks. Amy wasn't finished, though, not even close. "Oh, and I have something else to show everyone," she says, taking out her phone. She began looking through her bridesmaids' group chat. "Look," she adds, pointing to her screen, "babe. This tiny pool has been in use. I've started placing bets with the females. I swear that for a moment when I was reading these texts, my brain simply stopped functioning. These females who were meant to assist Amy in organizing our wedding had been placing real bets on her ability to carry it out. Before the ceremony, one of her bridesmaids had wagered $200 that Amy would pretend to change her mind. I sobbed at the altar as someone had $150 on me. Lisa had placed a $300 wager that Amy would do something spectacular. In other words, they were betting on a football game rather than a wedding, and they had a complete spreadsheet with odds and everything. The life of someone. The worst thing messages from months ago were among them. This was not an impromptu joke. This had been months in the making. All those meetings to organize the wedding. Most likely they were scheming ways to make me seem bad while they sat about. Amy giggling and pointed out various bets while she scrolled through the thread. "Rachel nearly got it right, you see. I'll bring a surprise guest," she said. Isn't that close enough to qualify Tom? He's still there laughing, like this is the greatest thing he's ever seen, while glancing at the phone over Amy's shoulder. "You really went all out for this one man," he adds. Some of the visitors begin murmuring as I glance around the room. Naturally, people are documenting this as I can see phones come out. It's likely that this will be shared on social media within 5 minutes. Amy is waiting for me to chuckle while she stands there in her immaculate white dress. I meant to dismiss this as simply another one of her tricks, as if she hadn't just ruined our connection between us in front of everyone we knew. She prods me in the side and says, "Come on, babe. You're not angry, are you? It's only a joke." Unless she glances at Tom and they both start laughing again. Tom isn't really going to protest or anything. When I look at Dan, he has already taken the folder out of his backpack halfway, but Amy hasn't finished yet. Oh, should I tell them about the backup plan? She asks, turning to face the visitors. In case he did become angry, I realized then that this was more than a mischievous joke. Amy wasn't just being herself here. This was blatantly harsh. She had been preparing how to make me seem bad in front of everyone I cared about for months. Her pals, her ex, and most likely half of the others in this room were all participating. I turned to face her as she stood there beaming with pride. Additionally, I no longer saw the girl with whom I had fallen in love. I came into someone who believed my emotions were a farce, someone who prefers to be laughed at rather than loved. At that point, I made the decision to give her a show if she wanted to. I gave her the most composed grin I've ever had in my life. In fact, she returned the smile, presumably believing that I was finally cracking the joke. I looked at the priest, who to be honest seemed like he wanted to quit the church right then. I say that very respectfully. Is that table ready for us to sign the marriage license? I have to quickly get something. The priest simply gestures toward this small table off to the side, presumably fearing that I'm going to make things worse. I approach Dan. Everyone seems to be holding their breath since the room is suddenly very quiet. Amy is still grinning broadly, but it's clear that she's becoming perplexed. Her script did not call for this. Mike helped me prepare this black folder, which I take out. It seems really official. I raise it for everyone to see. I say this in my finest meeting presentation voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to share a paper with my beloved fiancé before we proceed. Amy's head tilts like a dog in confusion. Hold on while I make my way back toward the altar. I'm taking my sweet time. I'm not even shaking my hands. I'm just prepared. See, Amy? I say this quite calmly, as if I were speaking to a child. Before the wedding, I had a little agreement drafted by my lawyer. Just in case you ever made the decision to do anything similar. In order for everyone to see the official-looking stamp at the bottom, I hold up the contract. Mike's secretary placed that one there. Amy's face begins to get pale. What on earth is that? She queries. Her smiles were finally beginning to show. I pretend to turn the pages and remark, "Oh, just a little clause. Look at this section right here." It declares that all joint financial commitments, including the wedding honeymoon and shared assets, are instantly invalid if one partner publicly humiliates the other before signing the marriage certificate. The visitors let out a collective gasp, similar to what happens in movies when the murderer is revealed. Amy is now blinking rapidly, as if she's trying to wake up from a nightmare. Hold on, what? It's not true. That isn't possible. Oh, it's genuine. Using my inner lawyer, I say. Additionally, it mandates that the offending party publicly apologize in front of all of our visitors. At last, Tom stops grinning. You can't be serious, dude. Isn't this a joke? I turned to face him, and I smiled broadly at him. Yes, Tom, I do take pranks extremely seriously. Amy is now perspiring since you were involved in the planning of this one. Her flawless makeup is starting to seem a touch sloppy. This is insane, darling. Actually, you're not angry, are you? I said the line at that point. Ever since I saw her with Tom at that coffee shop, I had been mentally practicing. What would make me angry? This is hilarious, Amy. I mean, it's all part of the pleasure. I loudly snapped the folder closed. I'm calling off the wedding altogether, dead quiet. From the other side of the room, it sounded like a pin dropping. Amy's flawless grin breaks. Hold on, what? Oh, I reply, tucking the folder under my arm. Don't seem so surprised. You made your joke. It's my time now. The wedding is off. Whispers and gasps cause the room to literally erupt. The priest retreats from us as if we were both insane. At last, the bridesmaids stop laughing. In about 2 seconds, Amy's face changes from pale white to blazing crimson. She responds, "You're kidding," but her voice is suddenly trembling. Am I? I turn to face Dan. Would you do the honors, man, Dan? He is an absolute legend. He takes out his phone, presses play, and drives off. Jack begins blaring from the speakers in the arena. Some visitors even burst out laughing. Others simply sit in disbelief. Some rise and begin to depart. Well done! In all honesty, Amy seemed on the verge of fainting. Are you not being serious? You're not walking away? she says repeatedly. I simply smile. I really am. I look to my parents. For the first time all day, Dad seems proud, and Mom is genuinely smiling now despite her tears. We're probably done here. I say. My dad gets up right away and begins informing everyone that the wedding is ended. The pragmatic one, always. My father. After that, I look back at Tom, who is attempting to gradually move away from the altar. You like robbing people of their fiancés, don't you, Tom? Congratulations, you have her all to yourself. At last, something removes the sneer from his face. Amy looks at him as she turns around. Tell him it's dumb, Tom, but he's already on his way out. I believe I'm going to leave. The bridesmaids are actually all staring at their feet right now. Some of the visitors are laughing out loud. Amy, too. Amy's entire world seemed to have fallen apart. You can't simply abandon me in this manner. She lets out a scream. At the end of the aisle, I pause and make one more turn. You're such a sucker for attention, Amy. Congratulations, then. You understand. I left my own wedding after saying that. The following day was a wild one. Amy's missed calls and messages on my phone essentially blew up. As though we were exchanging hundreds of texts, she first gave off the impression that she didn't understand why I had gone, continued to say things as if they were jokes. How come you're being so dramatic? She then became irate and began writing lengthy texts complaining about how I had made her feel inferior. Isn't that ironic? And how she was shocked that I would spoil our wedding with a pointless joke. She even attempted to argue that I had no right to abandon her in that manner. This is where it gets interesting, though. Do you recall the group chat where they were betting, being the complete genius that he is, Dan had taken screenshots of everything from one of the bridesmaids' phones prior to our departure? Every message they sent regarding organizing this practical joke. Every wager they made. They were even talking about methods to sabotage me in communications from months ago. Amy tried to play the victim on social media and tell people that I left her at the altar during the wedding. Then, however, those screenshots began to circulate. It turns out that turning someone's wedding into a gambling game is not something that people like. It had enormous fallout. When they saw that others could view their texts, the bridesmaids who found it hilarious began to freak out. Because the screenshots were given to her prospective employer, Sarah, the maid of honor, really lost her employment chance. I suppose they didn't want someone who found it amusing to make fun of others. The next day, Amy's parents gave me a call. Her mother was in tears as she said she didn't think Amy would do this. As it happens, they had told her not to be fanciful at the wedding. In fact, her father claimed he understood why I did what I did and apologized to me. Then came the financial part. Amy began requesting that I reimburse her for the expenses of the wedding. I had paid for nearly everything, so I laughed at it. My account, the catering, my card, and the location. She had been boasting to everyone about her lavish honeymoon. All reservations are made in my name. After making a single phone call to each location, everything was canceled. In fact, the venue management was really understanding. Claimed that, although he had seen some bizarre wedding-related content, this was fresh. She was devastated by the cancellation of her honeymoon. She had already shared our incredible 2 weeks in Hawaii on social media. She had to tell everyone why she wasn't sharing photos from the beach. Her bridesmaids quickly began to distance themselves. When people realize they're going down with you, they quickly vanish, which is funny. Suddenly, even those who were aware of the entire situation didn't want to interact with her. Tom refused to return her calls or texts and utterly abandoned her. I suppose he no longer thought it was humorous. He was questioned about why he believed it was okay to disrupt someone's wedding. When her buddy Jen finally opened up to me, I could see how guilty she was. She was different from the others. She never found Amy's antics funny. I never participated in the group conversation. I never found it amusing to make someone seem bad. She said that she had been aware of the plot for weeks, but she felt compelled to keep quiet because of fear of Amy betraying her. She explained to me how she tried to caution Amy and pleaded with her to cancel, but Amy dismissed her, stating that it would be amusing to watch my response. Naturally, Tom had no trouble complying. Most likely believed that made him appear cool or something. However, Jen detested every moment of it. She informed me that the night before the wedding, she didn't get much sleep. Knowing what was going to happen made me sick with worry. Additionally, she was unaware of the plan until she noticed me standing at the altar. She claimed that she froze when she wanted to shout to stop it before it happened. Her voice was low and remorseful as she said, as if she believed that I would despise her for not doing more. However, I noticed something I hadn't seen in months for the first time. Real common sense. Someone who wasn't content to follow the herd. Someone who was concerned about people's feelings. And to be honest, that was more memorable to me than the entire wedding fiasco. Amy arrived at my flat a week after everything had happened, looking as though she hadn't slept for days. Her engagement ring is still on. She broke down in tears as she expressed her regret. She didn't intend for things to go this bad. How she still cherished me. And we could make this right. I gave her an envelope just now. An invitation to a fictitious wedding rehearsal was enclosed. Our wedding was scheduled to take place at the same location and time. The list of guests. Everyone who witnessed her small trick. No name of the groom. Were even now just a note to that effect. Before she understood, she stood there and read it about 5 times. I just closed the door in her face as she glanced up. Do you recall all the phones that were recording throughout the wedding? Yes. Videos began to appear online. As a joke, people began referring to her as the bride who got abandoned. A meme was created from her own practical joke. Then, additional screenshots would reveal how long they had planned this, how much money they bet, and all the nasty things they said about me in their group chat. Some of Amy's pals attempted to defend her online by stating that I should have handled the prank better. Every time someone gave me Amy's communications, they ended up seeing the screenshots as well. Amy attempted to contact me through common acquaintances, claiming she had learnt her lesson. She eventually ran out of individuals who would stand up for her. Amy never really recovered from the wedding that never happened, and it has been 6 months since then. She persisted in attempting to re-enter my life by messaging me to promise that if I gave her another opportunity, she would make things better. As if chances were some limitless resource that she hadn't already depleted with all of her foolish antics. However, I was finished. She also lost her bridesmaids, the same people who shared her laughter. The maid of honor, Sarah, even texted me a lengthy apology saying that she felt terrible about what happened to Tom too late and that she should have told me. He began telling people that he was duped into the entire situation and barred Amy from everything. When I last heard from him, he had returned to his hometown and was now employed at his father's store. It turns out that the simple life wasn't all that horrible. Amy's parents continue to express regret whenever they see my family. In a Christmas card, her mother told me that she always remembers that day and wishes she had recognized the warning signals sooner. In fact, her father assisted me in selling the house Amy and I were planning to move into. The strange thing is that this entire chaos really produced something positive. I started going out for coffee with Jen sometimes just to chat, you know. It turns out that Jen had been interested in me for some time, but she definitely kept it to herself since I was seeing Amy. Our time together increased. At first, nothing major, just work lunch breaks, perhaps going out to eat sometimes. Everything about her is different from Amy, kind yet quiet. Considers the sentiments of others, never attempts to make fun of other people. 3 months following the nuptials. It wasn't. We formally began dating. She is adored by my parents. Even my sister, who detested Amy from the beginning, believes that Jen is the right person for me. Amy tried to create controversy online by claiming that Jen had planned everything and had stolen me from her after learning about us through common acquaintances. No one took her seriously. Any sympathy people might have had was kind of destroyed by the screenshots showing her plotting to embarrass me with her ex. Amy, by the way, is still working to repair her reputation. On Facebook, she posted a lengthy public apology detailing her growth and lessons gained. 2 days later, she attempted to approach Jen in the parking lot of my business. She had to be escorted out by security. Actually, I'm living a better life now. Received a promotion at work. This time a real one. It wasn't the one Amy ridiculed. Relocated to a new apartment in a more desirable area of town. I'm taking it easy with Jen. Last month we took a vacation. Just a quick excursion to the beach. Nothing special, but it was good to be with someone who didn't feel the need to make a joke out of everything or share it all on social media. Oh, and the prenup folder is still with me. It was framed and given to me as a birthday present by my lawyer buddy Mike. I currently have it up in my home office. Jen finds it amusing. I escaped a gunshot, according to my pal. I believe I escaped a whole firing squad. I can't believe I didn't see what was coming when I look at old photos of Amy and me. But when you wear rose-colored glasses, you know what they say. Red flags are just flags. The most peculiar aspect. In fact, I'm glad it happened. I may have been married to Amy if she hadn't shown her true nature that day. I might have put up with her jokes and pranks for years without realizing she was having an affair with Tom behind my back. I'm with someone who respects me instead. Someone who believes that love isn't about playing practical jokes, getting likes on social media, or making fun of your lover for amusement. That's where everyone ended up then. Amy lives with her parents and is still unmarried. Tom has returned to his hometown. The bridesmaids dispersed among the several states. And me, in fact, I'm content. It turns out that the finest things may occasionally come from the darkest day of your life. Story 4. Brooke is my name. I am the CEO of a large medical supply firm in Seattle, and I am 33 years old. I've dedicated the last 10 years to developing my profession, taking last-minute business trips, working over the weekend, and foregoing every vacation in order to advance in the company. I don't have a spouse, children, or time for casual interactions with my coworkers. The icy woman who comes first and goes last is me. But I'm only the stand-in for my family. Out of my 3 sisters, I am the oldest. Madison, 27, teaches preschool in the Spokane suburbs. Natalie, 25, just married and 6 months pregnant, is the youngest of a married couple with twin boys. They both reside in Tacoma, close to our parents' house, and they have one clear trait in common. They contact me whenever they need a babysitter. This Saturday, are you able to watch the children? Over the past year, I've heard that question at least 30 times. Sometimes it's immediately following a taxing 18-hour flight, and other times it's when I'm getting ready for a significant presentation. I usually say yes, though. I was self-sufficient when I was younger. While she worked on Madison's allergies or helped Natalie learn to read, my mom frequently left me to deal with problems alone. I received a full scholarship to college and managed to support myself without the assistance of anyone save for that strong eldest who never asks for aid. Everyone started using my image as a justification to believe that I could always provide more. I recall waking up around 5 in the morning on Mom's birthday last year. To prepare supper, pick up my nephews from school, wrap presents for Madison, and bake a cake. Madison and Natalie were laughing with family members in the living room when the celebration began, and I was in the kitchen chopping fruit. One thing my mother said was that Brooke is usually very considerate. You have my admiration. However, such pride was never accompanied by true comprehension. And me? It's been 4 years since I had a true vacation. I just organized a trip to Hawaii with a colleague. After contracting the illness, Madison contacted and asked if I could just lend a hand for 3 days. The ticket was canceled. The vacation is over. I have no grudges toward my nephews. I can't even admit how much I adore them. However, such affection shouldn't be taken advantage of, particularly if it's viewed as an obligation. When Natalie continued blowing up my phone during a video conversation on a Tuesday morning, I began to realize this. When I responded fearing anything was amiss, she said rather casually, "Can you come watch Minnie? I'm going to the spa with a pal." After pausing, I laughed dryly. "For that, you're calling me during the meeting," Natalie laughed. "You're not dating. What may occupy your time?" My phone was placed on the table. In their eyes, the thoughtless yet recognizable line went deeper than it should have. My life meant having no family and no children. Didn't matter. I wasn't asked whether I was exhausted. If I had a life of my own, nobody gave a damn. They simply thought of me as the one who was always available. I became invisible as a result. I started to question whether I would eventually vanish from this circle of accountability. Would my family members even notice? My phone started vibrating when I was getting ready to deliver the quarterly report at work. Madison was the one. Unless it was an urgent matter, she seldom ever phoned during business hours. The children are ill, much like Brooke. Are you able to pick them up? Hey? I unmuted my laptop and replied, "What is going on? How are you?" Madison had a honey-sweet voice. I just had a small question. I sighed, remaining composed. What is it? You aware that Mom will shortly reach 60? For her, we have a really special event planned. Everyone is helping to create something truly remarkable. However, it is quite expensive. She hesitated, as though she was anticipating my reaction. Indeed. I bit my lip. What is the amount? Oh, around $4,500? As if it were coffee money, she said. Don't worry, however. Natalie and I have already contributed. To cover the remainder, you only need to donate around $3,000. I almost dropped my phone. That's almost a whole month's rent for my flat in downtown Seattle. $3,000. Will a rock band be hired? Addison chuckled. No, but this is a significant occasion. Mom has always wished for everyone to be together, you know. Is it transferable? I glanced at the red-glowed hospital budget on my computer screen. The trip to Colorado that I had planned for March would obviously have to wait, as usual. All right, I answered in a bland voice. Give me the information. I received the message a second later. Oh, and make sure you take the whole week off from the 12th to the 18th, Madison continued. Avoid scheduling any business travel. The schedule is packed with events. I gave a robotic nod. All right. I didn't even have time to inquire about the plan, its location, or its purpose, because everything happened so quickly. A whole week. But I said nothing as usual. That was nothing new to them. I attempted to bring it up during calls the following week, but Madison and Natalie continued to sidestep the subject. The specifics are still being finalized, nearing completion. All you have to do is conserve your energy so you can play with the children. While bouncing a crying infant in her arms, Madison said casually during a FaceTime call. I became uncomfortable. Nobody explained the strategy to me in detail. Regarding Mom's birthday, I didn't even get included to a group chat or get an email. All of my knowledge was hazy and disjointed. The truth was then revealed at a weekend supper at our parents' place. Natalie clapped her hands as I set a salad bowl on the table. Everyone, big news. It's official. We will all be staying at Moonberry Lodge in Montana next week. There is snow all over. Private bungalows and hot springs. The table exploded. Mom smiled. The girls began discussing what color ski coats to bring after Dad gave Madison a pat on the back. I went cold. Wait, I said. Moonberry Lodge. Nobody informed me of the precise dates or the place. I haven't even made a travel reservation. Madison paused, glancing at Natalie. The energy wavered. Mom turned to face me after clearing her throat. Her eyes were far away. The problem is that everything has been planned, Brooke. We truly want Mom to be able to unwind without worrying, and the kids need someone. Would you please do the family a great favor? I put down my glass of water. You mean I stay behind to supervise 5 kids while everyone else travels to Montana? Natalie smiled nervously. The children adore you, you know. You don't actually know anyone there, to be honest. The mountains would be boring for you. I was taken aback. It was all evident at that instant. I had been left out from the beginning. Despite being the largest contributor, I was never included in their trip, but the money I gave helped cover some of the costs. I was the ideal unpaid nanny, free, trustworthy, and single. My expression changed, but no one saw. Or perhaps they simply disregarded it. When I inquired gently, "Did any of you think that maybe this time I'd say no?" the room fell into an odd hush. Nobody responded. As if it were the most intriguing thing in the world, Madison picked at her salad. With her fork, Natalie played. Mom let out a sigh, assuming the part of the defenseless mother with the challenging daughter. I hold the napkin on my lap and straighten my back. Thus, everything is prearranged. Tickets are purchased, and the schedule is established. And nobody even considered asking whether I wanted to participate. You wouldn't like it anyhow, my dad said as he looked up from his glass of wine. It's chilly, loud, and crowded. You enjoy stillness. I let out a hollow, resentful laugh. Therefore, I'm immediately disqualified because I don't have a husband or children, simply due to the fact that I am not like my sisters. I'm not eligible for this vacation. Be less sensitive. Flatly, Mom said. Because you're skilled at it, they entrust you with the children. Everybody has a role. My part, I looked her in the eyes and repeated, What precisely am I supposed to do, the person who provides childcare and payment, so my sisters can unwind? Annoyed, Natalie raised her head. You act as though we're taking advantage of you. In addition to stress, we have our own families. It's only a week. You don't really lack the time. I gripped my hands and tried to maintain a steady voice as I said, It's not about not having time. It's about not feeling like I'm a part of the plan, not being asked and not being invited. Mom sighed deeply and shook her head. You're like this all the time, Brooke, presenting yourself as the victim at all times. I leaned toward the table and pushed my chair back. I'm not a victim, no. However, I'm also not an unseen assistant you can call upon whenever the family needs someone to make a sacrifice. After turning, I left the dining room. Everyone remained seated, nobody trailed behind. Don't apologize, not even a regretful look. Mom said something loud enough for me to hear as I reached for my coat beside the door. In a few of days, she will cool off. She does it every time. This time, I didn't calm off before closing the door. I had trouble sleeping that night. As I walked my apartment, I reflected on all the occasions I had to postpone dates due to Natalie's need for a babysitter. Even though everyone else was laughing in the living room, I was the only one in the kitchen on the restless evenings when Madison phoned to hurry and pick up the boys for the holidays. When I eventually raised my voice, they accused me of being overly sensitive. I brewed coffee the following morning, turned on my laptop and quietly typed, "Resort beside the beach." In March. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't staying here to babysit for a trip I wasn't even invited to. I brought up my phone and reviewed my schedule for that week. I was going to block aside vacation time, just like they asked, but for the first time in years I thought otherwise. I would take that time off, but not to babysit, and not in the city. I booked a flight. Not much, but enough to make me feel like I was at last taking care of myself. No one was expecting me to explain why I wasn't picking up my phone at a bright beach hotel overlooking the ocean. I glanced at the screen as I wrote out my email requesting time off. I had the impression that I was recovering a forgotten aspect of myself. They will be taken aback. They will be upset. They'll accuse me of being ungrateful. I don't care though this time. I've lived my entire life for other people. Time to live for myself. I saw the sunshine from Seattle stream through transparent curtains as I sat by my living room window on Sunday morning. My thoughts was clear after a restless night. Clear as ice. I had lost my confusion. There was just one thing I knew. I had had enough of being the oldest sister who sacrificed. I phoned my mother. The third ring was heard by her. Brooke. Her voice was flat as she spoke. I considered taking a trip next week. I started speaking in a forceful yet calm tone. I'm not going to remain behind to watch the kids. Quiet. Instead, I went on. A reputable qualified professional sitter will be my hire. In this manner, everyone can still enjoy the vacation while the children are carefully taken care of. Mom's voice abruptly became harsh as she answered slowly. Is a stranger being hired to monitor the children? Do you believe they'll feel at ease with a stranger? I responded, Mom, I need to sleep too. And this is the most sensible course of action if everyone's enjoyment of the vacation is the main goal. No, she interrupted me. It's completely nonsensical. You have time. You've got the resources, when you could obviously help. Why not? This isn't helping anymore. So I bit my lip. It is being exploited. Before I could continue, she ended the call. My phone buzzed again. Not 5 minutes later, Natalie, why on earth are you doing this? When I took her up, she snapped. I'm trying to figure out how to make the vacation enjoyable for everyone without having someone be the lamb sacrificed, I said, maintaining a level voice. Nobody is forcing you to make any sacrifices, she shouted. You behave as though we are tying you to a cross. In the meanwhile, you and I are balancing houses, children, and ourselves. What? Since I don't have a spouse or children, I cut in, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. I'm not allowed to feel fatigued. I'm unable to go on vacation. I'm not worthy of being treated like a member of the family. Natalie snorted. You're exaggerating. The world seems to revolve around you all the time. This isn't drama, Natalie. This is me at last realizing how valuable I am, and I refuse to be treated like a tool ever again. The person on the other end paused. Her voice then became icy. If you decline to assist, when the entire family abandons you, don't be shocked. See, Mom is crying. I hope you're content. As I put the phone down, my hand shook. For the first time in years, however, it wasn't fear or guilt. It came from, at last, escaping the invisible prison I had placed myself in. I didn't get any more calls all day. However, Madison's texts came flooding in. It's unbelievable that you would ruin Mom's birthday in this way. After all that Natalie has done for you, will Aunt Helen be able to keep you asleep at night if Mom's blood pressure rises as a result? It is the oldest's responsibility to help the younger ones. Brooke, remember your roots. Every line was read by them, like a paper cut each one. But I felt relief rather than anguish. I didn't respond. Rather, I confirmed my Santa Monica beachfront hotel reservation. Included is a full spa package. My reading list was created. I made a reservation for a walking tour at sunrise, and most importantly, I switched off my phone. In airplane mode. I prepared a decent supper for myself that evening, lighted candles, and listened to soothing jazz. No wailing infants. Could you please assist me immediately? There was no unseen burden on my shoulders as I had assumed. One thing is certain, even though I have no idea what will happen next. They can no longer dictate to me and expect me to comply without question. The salty sea wind kissed my cheeks like a soft embrace from freedom when I got off the plane in San Diego 2 days later. At the last minute, I had chosen California over Florida, only because I wanted to do something totally different even for myself. In La Jolla, I leased a modest apartment with a view of the coast. Still plenty to sleep in. Enough to prevent me from feeling isolated. I entered with a crossbody bag and a small luggage. I didn't require much. I wasn't bringing along coloring books, snacks, or diaper bags this time. Only sunscreen. A fresh pair of flip-flops with an unread book. I opened the door to the balcony. I took a big breath and realized that for the first time in years, there were no family calls or texts. No. Brooke. Could you? My footsteps pressed into the wet sand as I strolled down the shore the following morning. The sea was streaked with amber and gold as the sun rose slowly. For the first time, I sipped my coffee while sitting on a wooden bench with a view of the ocean and thinking just about myself. It didn't make me feel bad. My first day was spent seeing Old Town San Diego, where I passed rows of small stores offering handcrafted products along cobblestone streets. I purchased a silver bracelet that has the Italian phrase, Liberta Freedom, etched on it. I told the shopkeeper, "This is the first time I've ever treated myself," and she grinned. I had dinner at a seafood restaurant on the bay that night. I felt calm settling into every part of me as I sat by myself in the comfortable room. I didn't have to wipe a weeping child's face. Nobody broke off to discuss marital drama or house repairs. Nobody thought of me as the fallback option. In the third day's morning, I looked at my phone. Mom hadn't missed any calls, but the voicemail box was full. Almost 100 messages, primarily from Natalie Madison and a few family members. The screen was illuminated by the first few sentences. "Where are you, Natalie? The children have already been dropped off at your house. Madison, to what extent do you intend to pursue this, Brooke? Mom, you kept it a secret from everyone. I'm really let down." Like a completed novel, I put my phone down. I wasn't upset. I was really astounded that they were still not understanding, or perhaps never desired to, because I wasn't following their script anymore. I sat down with my favorite bowl of cereal turned on the TV and selected a gentle documentary. I didn't check any of the messages, but they continued rolling in. On the fourth day, I put my phone on silent for good. I hired a bike and went for a ride around Pacific Beach that afternoon. My hair was blown by the seaside breeze. I grinned as the sunlight touched my cheeks. For the first time since that terrible supper, I genuinely smiled. Liberty, like a present I had never previously dared to offer myself. I thought of the children as I sat on the balcony and watched the sunset on the evening of day 5. Lily's gap-toothed smile and Jake's large, wide eyes. Sophie's habit of clinging to my shirt in times of fear. Although I missed them, I didn't miss having to make sacrifices. I missed the times when I voluntarily provided, rather than when I felt pressured to. I was aware that as kids grew older, They would question why Aunt Brooke was no longer around. By then, I thought they would see that a woman who says no is not being cruel, and that love does not need quiet tolerance. She is courageous. I prepared to head back to Seattle by packing early on the morning of day 6. I was prepared not because I missed home, all set to take on them, all set to talk, all set to draw the line on the return flight. Behind me, the sky and water merged as I gazed out the window. I was fully aware that I would not be the Brooke they knew once I got off the aircraft, and that was all right. My phone was overflowing with alerts the morning I got back to Seattle. Upon exiting the airport, after over a week without electricity, it began to buzz continuously, like to a warning siren for the impending storm. I opened the screen. Madison's first message. "You're where?" "When we arrived at your residence, nobody was there. Natalie is causing Jake and Mason to get irritable. Could this be a joke?" At that point, you realized we had to head out for Mom. "Give me a call, Brooke. I have no idea what's happening." I watched the stream of texts continue as I climbed into the cab. "You think we'll drag all these bags to God knows where and 5 children? It's unbelievable that you accomplished this, Madison." Natalie. "You have greatly disappointed me. Mom." I inhaled deeply and closed my eyes. I had prepared all the justifications and explanations, abruptly overwhelmed by a surge of fatigue. After just 1 week of living for myself, they were already attempting to reintegrate me into that previous job. The responsible one. The fixer, the replacement. I arrived home to find my mailbox full. Sticky notes were affixed to the door instead of letters. "We stopped by. However, you weren't present." Mom broke down. The children inquired as to Aunt Brooke's absence. There was also a greeting from Aunt Frances, who I only saw at Christmas. It interrupted the entire journey. "Now your mom can't sleep." I went inside, hung my coat, and kicked off my shoes. I left everything just as I found it. Nice. Keep quiet. No complaints, no yelling kids, and above all, no one treating me like the go-to person for the family's issues. I listened to the voicemails as I opened my phone once again. Natalie's voice sounded like a razor. "Your light mom feels deceived. Do you even understand that, in front of our relatives, the entire family feels embarrassed? All eyes were on you, and then you simply vanished, as if we were unimportant." Madison's angry whisper followed. "Our months-long holiday plans are ruined by you. With Aunt Brooke in mind, Jake has been sobbing. How do you get any sleep at all?" None of them received a response from me. Since I wasn't what they truly missed, I also didn't apologize. It was the version of myself that blindly obeyed commands. I opened a bottle of wine that evening. As usual, the city was glittering from my balcony. But everything had changed for me. In my little flat, in quiet, I was aware that I had passed a threshold. It is a threshold of freedom rather than resistance. I was watering my plants on the terrace the following morning when my mother sent me a message. "I'm at a loss for words if you feel that you're no longer a member of this family." For the first time in my life, I put the phone down. I understood that true family doesn't use guilt to control, therefore those comments didn't hurt. The foundation of a true family is mutual understanding and the decision to support one another, not demands without conditions. I launched my laptop and enrolled in a class on night photography. I then looked for a European summer tour. I didn't seek advice from anyone. I acted without waiting for approval. I simply did it out of want. I was in the kitchen brewing tea, less than 24 hours after I got home, when I heard a rattling at the front door. I initially believed that someone had the wrong address, but then there was a clear intentional click, and the lock turned. The door opened immediately as I entered the hallway, just in case my mother was standing there with the emergency key I had given her years ago. At one point, she claimed that Madison and Natalie were behind her. They were all 3 flushed with icy rage, or both. "How long did you intend to stay away from us?" Mom inquired. "Not even a greeting." "No justification." She spoke in a voice as icy as the snow outside. They entered the entryway in this manner, even though I hadn't invited them inside. Their map of control included home. Madison put her fist on her hips, slammed her bag onto the chair, and scowled. "You abruptly left 5 children. We stood in the snow at your door." Not a message. Don't apologize. Do you think that's acceptable? I leaned on the kitchen counter, with my arms folded. Nobody inquired about my agreement. You allocated responsibilities, devised strategies, and gave me the most difficult task, then became irate when I refused to comply. Do you consider it to be normal? With her face hot, Natalie leaped in. You were helpful once. How did you get so cold-hearted? As was customary, I looked at my sister and spoke quietly when I was assisting. I came to the realization that I would never be able to say no again if I didn't say no this time. Mom stood with her arms folded, looking around my flat, as if she were evaluating everything. Then slowly but sharply, as glass, she spoke. Brooke, I never imagined you would become this sort of person. This family used to be proud of you. I chuckled. Not loudly, not resentfully. Simply the empty laugh of someone who had finally let go of a weight. Why was I usually the first person picked to make the sacrifice, if I was the family's pride? Why had no one ever inquired about my desire to participate in the events? Or do you think I'm only important when I'm helpful? Madison's voice was shrill as she kicked the chair hard. The trip was ruined by you. Mom was unable to appreciate it completely. I had to stay at home and monitor the kids by myself since the entire family is a disaster. It's all your fault. I gave Madison a direct, unblinking stare. What have I been doing for all these years, in your opinion? When you were ill, who looked after your children? Every time there was a family get-together, who prepared the food? Natalie had a last-minute spa appointment, so they had to reschedule their personal plans. You're so accustomed to getting that. You call it treachery when it ceases. Natalie took a step forward, tears in her eyes. You've evolved. You weren't always this icy. No, I answered quietly. I've remained the same. I just no longer put up with it. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Like a wake-up call, the quiet in the little chamber resounded. The hush was finally broken by my mother. Maybe I was mistaken to think you were the one keeping us all together if you really think of this family as such a burden. I looked calmly and nodded. You were wrong to treat that as a long-term commitment, but you weren't wrong to rely on me. Mom's eyes left mine, and she turned away. I have nothing else to say, if that's your preference. Natalie and Madison also remained silent. They indicated that it was time to leave by picking up their luggage. No embrace. No hand contact. With a last heavy thump, the door slammed behind them. Not loud, not dramatic yet, weighty. For a minute, I remained still. Don't cry. Not guilty. Only lightness. Returning to the table, I poured a new cup of tea and gazed out the window. The snow was starting to melt outside. Beneath the fading white areas was lovely green grass. This winter will end differently, I knew. With release, not with collapse. With a rebirth, not a split. I took up my phone and discreetly exited the family group chat a week after the altercation. Not a message, no justification. I just pressed leave group and let out a sigh. No peeing in response, no massage. Why no calls? Nothing but quiet. The sort that says, I don't matter if they can't control me anymore. For the first time, I started to reconstruct my life without focusing on the feelings or schedule of others. I got up early every morning, brewed coffee, and jotted down notes. Today, what do I want? Every day the responses are different. A stroll in the park on some days, perhaps dining at a new restaurant on others. On other days, nobody had the right to interrupt you while you were reading till the sun set. I originally considered taking a Thursday night painting class to be a luxury since I had to have my phone close at hand in case something went wrong with the kids. I painted freely now without hiding my weary eyes under happy pictures. I went to concerts by myself without making excuses, joined a reading club, and went to art exhibits on the weekends. And I came to the realization that solitude wasn't quite as frightening as I had been told. In June, I also began organizing my journey to Europe, first to Paris, then to Florence, and finally to Amsterdam. I've wanted to travel to these 3 dream locations since college, but I never felt I earned them. I didn't ask anyone's opinion this time. I didn't hold out for permission. As a promise, I printed the itinerary, made the airplane reservations, and affixed it to my refrigerator. I own this existence. I stopped posting hazy pictures of other people's children's birthday parties on social media. No more captions, like a ton of fun, as I was struggling to keep my composure. It was now photos of me on a rooftop with a glass of wine. Seaside sunsets, my first completed painting in class. Additionally, the smile in those pictures was no longer for it. My mother was still missing. Those afternoons spent making apple pies together were missed. When I slept off on the couch, she covered me with a blanket. However, I also couldn't forget the day she mentioned that her eyes were chilly. I have nothing else to say if that's your preference. Some relationships end because of disrespect rather than a lack of affection. And where justice no longer existed, I had given up on finding love. I was seated in a little Fremont cafe one late March afternoon when I noticed a mother and daughter walk past the window. Giggling, the young girl pulled her mother's hand, and the mother leaned down to caress her hair with adoring eyes. My chest constricted, but something inside of me softly melted at the sight. I became aware that I had not lost any relatives. A part of my family that never really saw me was gone. I now have the opportunity to develop a new sort, one that begins with me. I unlocked emergency contacts on my phone that evening and deleted my mother's number. I no longer wanted to be someone's fallback option, not because I was hateful. Instead, I added a new contact, one of my art class friends, Marissa. She used to trek alone around Iceland as a photographer. I'm game if you need a travel companion for Florence. My heart felt warmer, she had murmured. Midnight was no longer the center of my existence. Hello, sister. Last minute pleas for childcare in between meetings or texts. It now encompassed timely meals, restful sleep, and open dialogue. UN pressed and refused to compromise. I'm not sure whether Madison and Natalie will ever comprehend what I've gone through, or if Mom will ever knock again. However, I am aware of this. I'll welcome them politely if they come back. However, the default sacrifices will end, sitting at my apartment window on the morning of April 1st. It struck me as sunlight poured like silk through the transparent drapes. At last, I had crossed a threshold I had never previously ventured to approach. I once thought it was selfish to choose oneself. That is, if I wasn't constantly accessible or willing to make sacrifices. When I was called by my family, I was a nasty guy. Throughout my adolescence, I confused volunteering with responsibility and love with duty. Now, however, everything seemed more obvious than before. I don't live for myself because I'm selfish. Since I always had the right to recall how I felt during those initial days in San Diego, I'm only honoring myself. Uncomfortable. Empty. I feel guilty. However, as time went on, each brief moment of independence showed me that one's value isn't determined by the amount of sacrifice one makes for others. It's because they genuinely live for themselves. I was no longer offended by the family's quiet. It actually allowed me to recover, to revise my narrative without the alterations caused by the expectations of others. I enumerated all I sacrificed for other people, canceled vacations and abandoned pastimes. I used to call those dreams unrealistic. I'm now reassembling them piece by piece, creating a new image of a woman who is aware that she is entitled to happiness without seeking approval. I began planning little weekend trips, easy climbs in the Skagit Valley at Rattlesnake Ledge, and visits to local farmers markets and tulip fields. Every month, I made it my mission to try something new, no matter how little or insignificant, as long as it made me happy. A girl at the adjacent table said to her companion, "I'm afraid that if I say no to my family, they'll think I'm selfish," as I was sitting at my favorite cafe one day. I grinned to myself. I was familiar with that sensation and understood that conquering it was the most difficult and liberating thing in the world. To the girl, they could say one thing: "You're not selfish, in my opinion, for selecting yourself. You don't have to apologize because you're living your truth." I knew in my heart that I would never wish to break off my family's bonds. I just couldn't sustain a relationship in which unconditional sacrifice was required and love was conditioned. I'll welcome them if they ever want to comprehend. If not, though, I won't turn around. Because I will no longer live to prove myself to anyone. I'm here to enjoy every second of life, to create a life of which I am proud. I'm learning to love myself without passing judgment, and with patience and gentleness. And that's the best basis for any future connection I've discovered. A voluntary bond between free, full individuals, not a mute sacrifice. Summer will be here soon. I'm prepared to start my ideal trip around Italy, so I've reserved a ticket to Florence. This was not intended for me. No messages requesting Brooke. Are you able to disrupting every moment of liberty? I wrote a little message for myself on my kitchen counter before I left Seattle. Greetings from home. Brooke. At last you made your own decision. I'm certain this time. I've never made a better choice in my life. The tale of Brooke serves as a potent reminder that self-love is not selfish. In a society that exalts quiet sacrifice, especially that of women, it is imperative. It takes courage to set limits and refuse requests. In order to recover her identity and create a life independent of other people's approval, Brooke deviated from her usual family role. She made the decision to live truthfully, completely, and most importantly, for herself. How do you feel about Brooke's choice? Was this the only way she could really keep her peace, or was she being too strict? For more moving family tales like this one, leave a comment below and remember to subscribe to the channel. Story 5. The Hayam Delara. On my birthday, I brought a homemade cake to my parents' house, only to watch them hand my sister the keys to a brand new home. They didn't even say happy birthday. Not one gift, not one glance. But here's what they didn't know: the lottery ticket. I got inside their present bag. The value of the one they never opened went beyond money. Everything was revealed. Tell me what time and location you're listening from before we get started. I'd love to know because this story, it starts with silence and ends with something they could never buy. I woke up to the familiar creak of my ceiling fan and the pale light slipping through the cheap blinds I still hadn't replaced. No singing, no knock at the door, no birthday text from mom, just the hum of the refrigerator and a soft egg I tried to ignore. I turned over and reached for my phone, half expecting a message. Anything but the lock screen just showed the date my birthday, a Tuesday, and not a single notification from the people who were supposed to remember me. Growing up, birthdays were always a shared event. Me and Serafino 2 years apart, but always treated like one person when it came to cake and candles. But once she hit her influencer stride, the shared part disappeared. Just like the attention, I rolled out of bed and shuffled into the kitchen, letting the silence settle around me like old dust. The smell of vanilla bean and lemon zest still lingered from last night. The cake sat finished on the counter. My own recipe, light lemony, built with patience and sugar. I'd made it for them. I told myself it didn't matter whether they remembered, but part of me still hoped. After a peaceful breakfast and a short shower, I packaged the cake gently, folding the edges of the wax paper as if it were something sacred. I didn't bother dressing up, just pants and a beautiful blue blouse, the type of attire no one notices. I drove the 15 minutes to my parents' place with the cake seat belted alongside me, like a vulnerable passenger. Their driveway was crowded. I paused. Mom hadn't spoken about visitors. I let me ponder for a bit. A surprise for me, perhaps. However, I could hear the chuckling as I moved in closer. Bright, practiced the voice of Sarah Finn. All of this was not necessary for you to accomplish. Is that champagne, my God? I froze when I entered through the open front door, and big canvas banner helium balloons touching the ceiling, and gold and white streamers adorned the living area. Sarah Finn, welcome home. In the center of it all was her, as radiant as ever, posing with the ideal astonished look while holding a phone. A little group had assembled. Neighbors and relatives. The manager of her brand. Beside her, holding a glass of wine, was my mother. Dad was grinning. I cleared my throat. Nobody took attention. With the cake still in hand, I made my way to the kitchen and softly set it in the buffet table's corner next to a tower of store-bought cupcakes that were adorned with edible glitter and Sarah Finn's initials. Oh, dear Dolores. At last, Mom spotted me. She approached, just brushing across my shoulder. Are you able to assist with the picture? A group shot is what we're doing. I started to say something. With a smile that stopped short of her eyes, she interrupted me. Drama is not needed just now. I took a deep breath, snapped the picture from behind the lens of the camera that was left on the counter. I saw my father take something out of his pocket. A bright brass key. This is for you, my love, he said. A new location, 3 rooms, yours alone. Cheers broke out in the room. I continued to take photos. I have mechanical hands. Like always, my cake faded into the background as it sat undisturbed in the corner. A toast was called for. I turned away and sought a place by the table to transform into a child while breathing through my nose. After hurrying by me, one of Serafina's friend's kids nipped the buffet's corner. After teetering, the cake box fell. It made a wet, soft sound. Final. Instinctively, I bent down to collect the fragments, my hands trembling. Like a spilled attempt, the icing spread all over the tile. The middle of one layer was completely cracked. Mom sighed as she glanced over. That's why honey we purchase from experts. Nobody volunteered to assist. Nobody even made a move. I slowly got to my feet, gripping the box as if it were dead. The throng had dispersed. More pictures, more compliments. It came with me and my dessert. Ignored. I kicked off my shoes at the door of my apartment. The flat was still warm from the morning's baking. I opened the freezer, relocated a bag of peas, and made space. I put the shattered cake inside, as if it were worth preserving. The same recipe, less sugar next time. I continued to gaze at the closed freezer door, then made their way to my tiny kitchen table. I took out the lottery ticket envelope I had hidden in my handbag that morning. I hadn't felt like giving them a present. They didn't know what else I had done that day, but I departed with a cake that nobody wanted on my own birthday. When I came home, I didn't weep. Unlike in my 20s, when everything seemed to be falling apart, I didn't yell, hurl things, or pace my little apartment above the laundry room. After removing my shoes and placing the box with the damaged cake on the counter, I simply stood there and listened to the distant buzz of dryers spinning downstairs. The spring rain had begun by the time it was nearly 7. There was a gentle, continuous drizzle that tapped against the windows like an old lullaby, not a storm. It was the type that left you feeling more alone than thunder could. On the burner, my food remained unfinished. Lasagna that has been reheated. I wasn't hungry. My body was still full of that empty type of agony, like I'd eaten stillness all day, and now it was growing in my chest. I had brought leftovers from the party, and they were piled high on the kitchen table. 2 envelopes, a couple scones, and some partially consumed cookies. Earlier that morning, I had placed cards in Mom and Dad's present bags. They weren't even signed by me. Merely scratch-off tickets. Not very fancy. Just a small joke. Tucked within sparkly cardboard is a little wish. Not even they had opened them. I took a seat. One envelope sat next to the other, still neatly sealed, as if it had never been touched as my fingertips moved down its edge. The last ticket I had in my handbag as a backup was the one I picked up. Today, I didn't intend to scratch it. It was meant to be a backup card in case theirs all turned out to be a bust-in if someone responded, "Nice try," "Soy sushais," and laughed. Here's another thing I was going to say. This one could be the winner. Isn't it funny I had intended to perform my final miracle for them? Curled up a bit from the warmth of my purse, it was now in my hand. I took a quarter out of the drawer and began to scratch it. A repeat of a cooking show muttered on the TV as they went through the motions without really thinking. 3 digits that match. I stopped and leaned in. Once more, 3 digits match. I gazed. $120 to $1,000. It took a while for my hand to shake. My brain needed a moment to catch up, for a breath to catch. My heart is telling me to wait. Did that just happen? I blinked, checked once more. Looked up the code on the back on Google. Twice. It was authentic. That ticket was like something radioactive in my palm as I sat there in silence. I could sense its heat. Perhaps the blood rushing to my face was the cause. For a long time I was not happy, not even a sense of relief. There was only an odd quiet, as if the entire universe had stopped to ask me one question: what comes next? It wasn't a noble initial idea. No, it wasn't. I should still give it to them, I suppose. It was a moment of intuition. Get out, keep safe. Then, however, my conscience formed over decades of Sunday sermons and family dinners whispered, "You promised to give it to them every time." It would be a gift for the entire family if it hit that. On their birthday, however, families don't abandon their daughters, do they? They don't give a house to the golden child and ask someone else to take a photo. They don't sigh as if you were a burden in the first place and throw away the cake you spent the entire night making. They don't ask you to keep quiet and then never remember that you ever said anything. My gaze returned to the garbage can beneath the sink. I could still hear my mother's voice. We purchase from experts because of this. I glanced at the ticket once more. Only a gift counts, I said out loud. You're worth being believed in by someone. I carefully folded the ticket, put it in a pristine envelope, and tucked it into my top drawer, along with my passport, expired coupons, and that picture of Serafina and me on a tire swing as children. I then went to the trash and threw in the 2 unopened envelopes that I'd taken from the table. When they landed, there was not even a sound, only the faint sound of paper rustling, hitting paper. At the end of some things, it's really that quiet. I took a sticky note out of the refrigerator and wrote on it, "Perhaps it's time to start living like it's a new year if nobody remembers your birthday." I gazed at it after placing it on the cabinet above the sink. It wasn't particularly deep, but it was the most open thing I had spoken aloud in weeks. I made tea that I wasn't particularly interested in after clearing the table. I opened my laptop and entered search terms into the bar. Apartments outside of Charlotte that are affordable. My Wi-Fi is still performing strangely and the listings loaded slowly. I then clicked on another tab, culinary programs for adults. Perhaps. Asheville, I mumbled. Or Durham. Somewhere with air that doesn't smell like detergent and sorrow. I hesitated. Thought about notifying them, but I didn't go for my phone. I didn't open the family group chat that Seraphine controlled with her links and her filtered photographs and her statements about living consciously. I didn't compose a text to my mom since the reality was they wouldn't notice if I went. And maybe that's why I had to. That night, I made 2 decisions. I would retain the ticket and I would depart without notifying anyone. I didn't sleep much after that night. Some individuals stay up planning retribution. I remained up looking for culinary certifications and apartment leases. I packed what little I had in 10 days, signed a lease for a small Asheville apartment, and left notice at the bakery. Just 1 room. The kitchen is hardly large enough to turn around in, and the ceilings are slanted. It did, however, have one thing that my childhood house did not. Quiet. It didn't hurt. The early morning buses down the hill and the occasional above neighbor hauling furniture at unimaginable hours were the only sounds. It didn't bother me either. I was somewhere new, they reminded me. Somewhere I own. The birthday had been 2 weeks ago. It wasn't. Mom had texted me once, but I hadn't responded. "I heard you went out of town. I hope you're not being overly dramatic once more." I saw Dad's missed call and disregarded the voicemail. But he didn't text at all. I could picture its words. "You ought to have remained," or something like that. "Your sister truly needed your assistance in organizing the thank you messages." Saturday was the day. For my culinary class assignment, which involved purchasing local vegetables from the farmer's market, I got up early. The rain had stopped, and a mild, foggy morning had taken its place. I put a little notepad under my arm, curled my locks back, and wore my apron over trousers. I was surprised to see familiar faces. That was the reason we were here. Behind me, I heard a familiar voice as I scanned a stand of heritage carrots. If it's not Eileen's little baker, that is. Slowly I turned. Sylvia Aunt. She had the same appearance. She wore sunglasses, a flowing scarf, and her silver gray hair in a lazy bun. She was carrying a basket of strawberries and herbs. "Delara." Startled, she blinked. "Why are you here?" I struggled to grin. "Hello?" "The world is little. I was unaware that you had relocated to Asheville. All I needed was a change of scenery." Her level of knowledge was unknown to me. "Things best to leave things open-ended." She took a step forward. "Are you working here? I'm enrolled in a culinary school, long overdue." "That's fantastic." She gave a quiet smile. "That would have delighted your grandmother." Eventually, we took a seat at one of the picnic tables that was shaded and close to the coffee cart. I bought her a chamomile black tea myself. I wasn't thinking clearly, but it was too warm for hot beverages. She gave me a prolonged look. "But I guess your mother didn't mention that you moved." "It's been a little stressful." "That's one way of putting it." I gave a shrug. Seraphine's brand extension, or whatever she's calling it these days, has them completely occupied. Sylvia took a gulp of her tea. I assumed that the inheritance could have caused you some distress. I blinked. I apologize. Which inheritance? She hesitated. From your granny. Eileen. My body froze. You didn't want anything you said I was told. No. Serafina was the one I wanted to manage things I couldn't breathe. Who said that to you? She seems taken aback by my response. Mommy, you thought it was preferable if Seraphin continued the family tradition, she added. I put down my cup. I didn't say that. We were silent for a long time. Then she let out a sigh. The home was given to her, the garden. Eileen had set up a little trust money. I guessed. I got up, though. I had to leave. I was on my way when I said, Delara, back at my flat. I did not take a seat. I immediately went to my inbox and opened the old family documents folder that I hadn't looked at in years. A scanned PDF of my grandmother's will from 4 years prior was there. The sentence was read 3 times by me, Serafina and Delara. My granddaughters will each receive an equal share of the inheritance, nor a maybe nor a footnote. As clear as day, with my hands shaking on the desk's edge, I sank into my chair. Then I had a memory. Warren Blake, an old friend of Grandma's. He was a lawyer, a reserved guy with kind eyes, and he had a propensity to quote the Bible without being asked. Until she became ill, he took care of her affairs. 2 years prior, I had sent him a holiday card. I still had his number in my contacts. He picked up after the second ring when I phoned. Blake's home. Blake, Mr. Delara is here. Marin Delara. He sounded kind, yet a little perplexed. Well, a long time has passed. Have you got a moment? It has to do with my grandmother's property. A pause. Naturally. I informed him about Sylvia's remarks on the bequest. Concerning Serafina, this time there was a lengthier wait. I recall that a month or so prior to Eileen's death, Serafina and your mother arrived. We completed the revised papers after they said that you had consented to transfer your share. I didn't ever sign anything. My voice was faint as I spoke. Once more he was silent. I thought you had. After that day, I never saw the original copy again, only the one they supplied. Soon after my stomach turned to Lara, I retired. He started off cautiously. Is your original still with you? I would advise you to have someone check both to make sure nothing was submitted without the necessary confirmation and to compare dates and signatures. I hung up after spending a considerable amount of time gazing at my phone. My birthday wasn't just forgotten by them. They removed me from a heritage that I had contributed to. Something in me ceased attempting to reason after that phone conversation with Mr. Blake. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I listened to the soft patter of late spring rain on the window and the hum of the refrigerator while I gazed at the ceiling of my studio apartment. The silence seemed different now, heavier, as if it were trying to tell me something I was afraid to acknowledge. This was no coincidence. This was a trend. I had been peeling back layers of what I had never seen before for 5 weeks after my birthday. My hands were kept occupied by the bread lessons, and I had just enough structure from my nights at the cafe to keep me from collapsing. However, nothing could make the pain of having my own history altered go away. Not even fire or flour. The message arrived at around 3 p.m. as I was preparing lemon glaze at my counter on a rainy Tuesday. A text message from my mother's number buzzed through my phone. I picked it up after wiping my fingers on a towel. Do not be concerned about Delara. She will, as usual, move on. Pay attention to the press release for the introduction of your brand. I spent a lot of time looking at the screen. There is no punctuation, without hesitation. As usual, I received a simple, informal sentence intended for Seraphine. That's what got stuck in my chest. No. She will go past it. She said it as though it were a quality of mine, even though I had heard that all my life, as if she relied on forgiveness as a weakness. I didn't answer, even though I couldn't taste anything because of the knot that developed at the back of my throat. I just slid the phone face down on the counter and kept swirling the glaze. The burn occurred at school later that day. Never in my life had I burnt a sauce. It was just butter, wheat, and milk, basic enough. But when I slept off, I allowed it to sit for too long, half a second. Then it suddenly became bitter. My teacher Marco saw right away. After lowering the heat, he stepped over and gave me a little prod in the direction of the prep area on the side. "Delara!" Silently, he said. "What's happening?" I started to say something to justify it. A long day, poor sleep. A headache, perhaps. Instead, though, I spoke something I had never said out loud before. I always believed that doing good would be sufficient. I whispered. As it happens, I was meant to be convenient. Marco was silent at first. He only gave a nod. His eyes were steady and compassionate. "Your silence is not owed to anyone." I laughed a little hollowly. That was their favorite part. The drizzle had become a persistent deluge by dusk. I was home, hair still damp from the walk back, sipping tepid tea, when I made the mistake of accessing social media. Sarah Finn's page was sparkling. "Legacy. Dinner for Grandma Eileen's vision," read the caption on one carousel of photographs. There was my mother lifting a glass. My father grinning next to Serafina in a green velvet dress that I'd helped her choose out 2 years earlier for an entirely other occasion. The caption went on to commemorate the upcoming phase of our family's history. I was not in any of the pictures. Not a word. Not even one from the backdrop that is fuzzy. Everything was being rewritten. Not only the will, not just my part, but the story as a whole. This time, it wasn't grief. Not even rage was involved. Something bone deep, something frigid. The knowledge that I wasn't just forgotten. That was how they liked it. It was about 8 p.m. when my phone rang. Sylvia, aunt. After hesitating, I took it up. "Hello?" I said. A pause occurred. Then her voice sounded guarded and quiet. "Delara, I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm all right." I said a falsehood. I looked at a few of the photos. I had no idea what they had planned. "Your mother was surprised when you found out." "She doesn't generally." I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. A little stillness fell. Then I heard something unexpected from Sylvia. "Evelyn once told me that she felt bad about the way she handled things with you. However, it was always done after the event, when you weren't there to hear it every time." I shut my eyes. "She did, of course," I muttered. "When no one is around to hear it, regret is safe. Delara. She has always relied on me to not resist." I spoke to myself more often than to her. I hung up after thanking Sylvia. The flat was soon silent once more. I didn't mind it now, though. From beneath the bed, I took out a spiral-bound notebook that I had begun to reuse after using it for class notes. I started sending Grandma's lawyer an email to confirm the disparity. Mom texted, "Delara's social media post shouldn't concern you. Serafini referred to it as her grandmother's legacy. I'm not mentioned on a new page. I only wrote a single phrase. They anticipate my silent disappearance. Silence is strategy this time, though. No major confrontations, no big speeches, just evidence, proof, and purpose. I was going to be heard, but I wasn't going to yell. They expected me to discreetly vanish as soon as I finished writing that phrase. Silence is strategy this time, though. The refrigerator was open. I wasn't hungry. All I needed to do was do something with my hands. Something easy, something rooted. I ran my fingertips over a jar of thyme that I had purchased the previous weekend at the farmer's market. "When you're building layers, add time," Grandma used to say. "It lingers but doesn't shout." She did it that way. Never loud or ostentatious, but always memorable. When you listened. At culinary school, Marco gave us a family recipe challenge the next morning. Don't simply copy, develop something from scratch. Rethink. I didn't have to think long. Grandma Eileen's roast. She used to prepare it every second Sunday. The fragrance of garlic and molasses wafted through the hallways long before the first slice ever struck the plate. I remembered the way she used to crane her head as she stirred, singing something off tune while I peeled vegetables. I didn't want to copy it this time, though. I wanted to be honest about it. I substituted cumin and a pinch of smoky paprika for the sweetness. Darker, deeper pushed the sear. I let the natural juices do the talking instead of using honey glaze. Before glazing, let the quiet linger in the pan for one more second. The room was silent when Marco took his first bite. He put his fork down and turned to face me. It's more like someone witnessing things snap into place than a teacher. "This is not nostalgia," he muttered. "Something else is involved." I gave a nod. It's who I could have become if I wasn't constantly playing it safe. He then informed me of the incident. An invitation-only industry taste where cooks showcase a single meal to a group of possible investors. Over the course of a single evening, names are formed in a location where restaurateurs listen and legacy mentors guide. "Come on in," he said. "Show this." I blinked. "Do you believe I'm prepared?" He grinned. "This has nothing to do with preparedness, Delara. It's all about visibility." My throat constricted. I glanced at the dish once more. Almost casually, he added, "You must use your true name while registering. They must be aware of the presenter." My first instinct was to say no. In my mind, I could practically hear my mother's voice. "She's not the kind to crave attention." And then Sarah Finn's favorite dig. "She's too sensitive for pressure." I shook my head slowly. "If they find out I'm coming, they'll make sure I don't." Marco didn't push, simply stated, "Then give them a chance." Back at my flat that evening, behind a fading index card with roast notes scrawled in the margins, I took out Grandma's old recipe box, the one I'd kept hidden since the day they gave Seraphin the house keys, and stuffed my cake in the garbage. It was a little folded fragment that I discovered. The silent one could clearly read her handwriting. "Your quiet will one day speak louder than theirs ever could." I gasped. 5 times I read it again. She had spotted me even when no one else had. I switched on my laptop and went up the registration page. Name Dolores Eileen Marine. I didn't flinch when I typed it. When the confirmation email came through, I glanced at it for a minute before sending a single message to Aunt Sylvia. "I'm presenting Grandma's roast next Friday. You're welcome, but don't tell them." No exclamation point or emoji, just the facts. I began drawing plating concepts in my prep notebook the next day. This time, I wanted to provide more than just a dinner, not because I needed them for class. On the 3rd page, I wanted to provide clarification. I highlighted one element that my mother never used, but that my grandmother constantly mentioned. Not once. Cloves. It was too antiquated, she said. Claimed that it overwhelmed everything. However, I had the roast with it for the first time and recalled how my grandmother had once looked at me when I was 12. "You can taste the difference," she inquired. I gave a nod. "It's bold because of that," she had stated. "It's yours because of it." Now I whispered out loud. "They will taste what they never dared to serve this time." I wasn't hiding from them, but I also wasn't doing it for them. And I didn't give a damn about anybody else knew. As soon as I entered the kitchen that morning, I should have seen something was off. Marco was already tense. As though preparing for contact, his sleeves were rolled halfway and his jaw was taut. He didn't say hello to me as usual. No quick grief, no nod. Rather, he muttered something under his breath while pointing to the clipboard and the inspector's hands. "Get ready." The white-coated man was stern yet courteous. This area provided us with an anonymous tip regarding incorrect labeling and possible cross-contamination. He used the flat of his pen to indicate my prep area. I blinked. "What no?" Yesterday, everything was examined twice. Before I departed, I went over everything. The inspector didn't appear to be persuaded. He gestured for one of the helpers to begin removing ingredients from the shelf. I had made the sauce base from scratch. It was 2 nights ago. Lost. I've bagged and tagged my spice mixes. There was a yellow sticker even on the rosemary oil I had made myself. We cannot permit these to be used in a public tasting without the appropriate documentation. "Oh," the inspector said. Marco maintained his composure, but I could see his jaw tighten. This was not an unexpected development. When the inspector had gone, he mumbled, "You're wanted off the board by someone." He did not have to name them. Then he said, "Someone." My stomach grew constricted. I could see her, Seraphin groomed fingertips typing out a message on her phone, probably in the middle of a facial. I didn't weep not then. But later that night, when I returned to the storage cooler to fetch the backup source, just in case I found the shelf vacant, everything was gone. Not just my supplies, but even the backup herbs I'd kept away with my name plainly labeled. Panic swelled in my throat. I started opening every container, sifting through containers. Nothing. That's when I got the notification. Seraphin had submitted a new clip, a close-up of a roast dish, framed just perfectly, with a drizzle pattern. I realized to well my plating my garnish. My God, the identical garnish I'd scrawled in my notepad 2 nights earlier. This was her caption. I peered at the screen as if it were about to break everything inspired by heritage, reinterpreted for contemporary tables. Every action, every goal. I carefully placed everything out. It was now public knowledge under her name. Slamming my notepad onto Marco's desk, I rushed back into the prep area. Everything has been taken. My voice was hoarse as I spoke. The roast! The concept, even the components. Now it's all hers. Marco cautiously raised his head. He didn't look pitying at me. They cut straight through the rage. Equally, he said now. Do you cook out of fear of failing, or do you cook as if you had nothing left to defend? His remarks were more impactful than everything that had occurred over the whole week. My hands were shaking, but not because of terror, as I made my way back into the kitchen. I started extracting what remained this time. Tucked up at the rear of the top shelf are a few root vegetables, a bouquet of wilting parsley, and cracked black pepper in a paper tin. Too harsh for company refers to a container of clove powder I brought from home, the same one my mother consistently refused to use. I took a harsh, raw, and familiar breath after opening the lid. After rolling my sleeves, I began cutting. I made another change to the roast recipe, not to save what had been taken, but to create something that was impossible for her to copy since it originated from a location she was unaware of. Once more, I thought about Grandma, her peaceful fire, her table, and her obstinate hands. And I reflected on all the times I had become smaller to fit in with a family that valued quiet, yet frowned upon individualism. At 2 a.m, this version of the meal did not request permission. I plated it. Mine, but not flawless. I snapped a photo, just for proof, not for uploading. A notification appeared. I noticed the post that Tessa posted. Do you want me to go? Simply say it. I paused for a moment before answering. Arrive early. Don't forget your camera, since serving a story before they can modify it is the only way to safeguard it. We will record everything they attempt to steal. As the catering crew drove by with carts of linens and glasses, Tessa and I waited just inside the loading doors, the pavement outside being misted by a gentle shower. As I examined my crate of last items for the third time, she adjusted the strap on her camera bag. Are you ready? Her question was hardly audible above a whisper. No, I thought. However, I gave a nod. The downtown sampling event was being hosted in an ancient brick structure with steel beams and exposed plumbing that had been somewhat renovated to feel modern. To remind everyone that the reason they were here was genuine, the space was filled with 8 tables each, with its own spotlight. I had acquired booth number 6 because to Marcos's contacts, and I became aware of who was stationed just next to me as we approached it. Sarah. All right. Naturally. While her lover held a mirror for last-minute lipstick checks, she was in full bloom chatting to a local TV anchor with 2 attendants at her sides. Wearing one of her grandmother's old brooches, she wore it sideways, as if it were now her own emblem. She grinned when I looked at her. Courteous. Empty. Calculated. I started emptying my container without saying anything. Tessa gently positioned herself, shooting over my shoulder while blending in like the press. I had just begun setting up my equipment when a young chef with a clipboard and a man bun passed by. Hey, he replied nonchalantly, gesturing to my table. You stole your sister's roast idea, didn't you? It's kind of brave of you to come here. I went cold. I apologize, but he was already on his way to the judge's table. Tessa halted the video. What on earth was that before I could respond? I overheard a brief exchange of words from behind Sarah Finn's booth. The Brock brand is favored by investors. Nobody wishes to wager on a wild card. Consistency is more important than kitchen drama. A wild card. My name was now barely audible. A drawback. Gazing at the freebies, I returned to my booth. The ingredient narrative, my method, and even a memorial to Grandma Eileen were all detailed in printed pages. Something didn't seem right. I grabbed one. I didn't own it. Inspired by the culinary heritage of the Brock family, the glossy pages were named and printed in a corporate serif font. My name appeared once buried at the bottom of the last page like a legal disclaimer. Tessa saw my hands shaking. It was altered by them. Flatly, I replied. It was rewritten. She made the correction. I didn't speak. I just reached for the blackboard. We had packed the one Tessa had suggested as a backup, in case I needed something more personal, with one piece of white chalk and a long, calm breath. I scribbled the sentence I'd been repeating to myself all week. A few recipes are passed down through the generations. Others are taken back. Before she even realized it was there, Tessa moved back, filmed her hand, and wiped a tear from her face. The judges started moving about. They were not ostentatious. No fanfare, no entourage, only notebooks, sharp vision, and experienced taste buds. Then I caught sight of him. One of the principal investors is James Rollins. Months prior, Sarah Finn had attempted to win Evelyn over. He paused at my booth and examined the plate. It had strong, uncooked edges and a burned umber sauce with roasted citrus peels, powdered clove, and hand flakes. Just what was important, no ornamentation. He leaned closer. I've been hearing about an innovative roast. Is this it? I looked him in the eye. No, I said. They took that one. I own this one. After giving a hesitant nod, he grabbed the spoon. I held my breath, but the voice I had been anticipating came before it made contact with the plate. This is a family matter, isn't it? With her own silver tasting spoon in hand, Finn murmured sweetly as she moved up next to him. She glanced at the whiteboard and then down at the plate. She grinned tightly. She remarked that the drama would have delighted Grandma. She loved the truth more, I told her, looking her in the eye without flinching. Serafina grasped the spoon as if she were about to do a show. With practiced grace, she dragged it across the sauce, dipped it into the roasted medallion, and brought it to her lips. Then she hesitated a moment. Her face broke. It was just barely noticeable. The corner of her lips twitched. Her eye flickered. After swallowing, she straightened her back, as if she had tasted vinegar rather than citrus and clove. It's daring she did it. Voice clipped. Evelyn stepped in at that point. She wore clothes for TV, not fashion. Too tall for the kitchen. Pearls hung like armor around her neck. Before she could say anything, her eyes narrowed as they surveyed the throng before settling on me. You've turned this into a show, she remarked, loud enough to be heard by the surrounding investors. Dallara, this is defamation. Our family is becoming a public spectacle because of you. I didn't flinch. Seraphin piped in, moving just slightly behind our mother, like she usually did when things got contentious. You used a lottery ticket to pay your way into this event. She laughed. That's not skill, it's just luck, disguised as a hustler. It wasn't what she said that hurt. It was their ease of arrival, as if she had practiced them in front of the mirror. I reached inside the inner pocket of my apron. I took the little packet out. Unmarked cream, in tone with a little edge at the corners from too many handlings. I raised it. I handed you this ticket. I spoke in a forceful yet composed tone. The one that you choose not to open, the one you discarded, just like everything else I've attempted to provide for this family. The room trembled, and there was a noticeable silence, as if everyone had turned down the volume save for my speech. Nevertheless, I went on facing the judges and investors. What they threw away was the foundation of this entire presentation and this particular moment. I didn't just happen to be here. I salvaged what remained to get here. Right immediately, Tessa moved forward. She was holding her phone. With a subtle gesture to the IT team managing the event's AV, the screen is already lighted. She brought it up to the above microphone and tapped the play button. Evelyn's voice, recorded only days before, emerged from the speakers. Not quite clear but grainy. In any case, nobody wants to hear Laura's side of the tale. It's terribly depressing, too disorganized. Everything is brighter, cleaner, and more palatable, Sarah. There was an electrifying hush. The sound of camera shutters followed. Investors whispering, journalists typing. One of the judges came up and indicated my booth. However, this is the only unique meal served here tonight. This is the only one that hasn't been given a press kit. Then came another. We've had enough publicity. Instead of using strategy, I would rather to be a chef who cooks from scars. Evelyn opened her lips to say something else, but nothing came out. Seraphin was the first to retreat. She didn't have a line to end the scene for once. A man with gray hair and a kind voice approached my table and placed a business card next to my blackboard sign. He gave me a direct glance. "We're willing to support your idea, but only if the story remains yours," he stated. "Your voice, your kitchen." Tessa murmured behind me as I glanced at the card and then back at him. "They're heading out." They were there when I turned. "Mom, my sister is leaving." The last phrase they were unable to type was punctuated by the tapping of heels on the showroom floor. That evening, they departed without saying anything more. I also didn't go after them. I didn't have to. 6 months later, the room I had only dared to sketch on notebook paper was filled with the faint buzz of clinking forks and the gentle rustle of napkins. With only 26 seats, light wood floors, and subtle copper lighting that warmed the space without trying too hard, my restaurant was small. The front window was painted with the name. No italics, no frills read Delara. Only my. I made my way carefully across the floor, stopping at every table. Despite the modest launch, every seat was occupied. Without making it about retaliation, Tessa had assisted in spreading the message. "Let the food speak first," she advised. The apron I donned in culinary school was still on me. The lottery ticket was still in the pocket close to my waist despite some fraying. I had already won something greater, so I wasn't scared of losing. Some things are more valuable when left unsaid. Close to the room's corner, a table with 4 tops sat silently. Evelyn, Seraphin, Tessa, Aunt, Sylvia. In an attempt to maintain her balance between 2 toppling banks, Tessa perched between the 3 of them like a bridge. Since the tasting panel, they had not communicated. Calls had been placed. There have been awkward apologies that never quite land. But perfection was not the goal tonight. It was about making room for the truth. I carried the last course, a recreated version of the cake they used to let drop to the floor, as if it didn't matter to their table myself. It was more elegant and smaller this time. Lemon zest cream and bitter chocolate ganache are piled over vanilla bean sponge. The same base, but more profound. Grown up now, sharper. Evelyn gazed at the object. Serafina did the same. Without fanfare, I placed the platter in front of them. The same recipe. Silently, I said, "Reduced sugar." No one immediately grabbed for their forks. Evelyn raised her head. "So you're forgiving us like this?" her voice inquired. Steady, but aloof. After giving it some thought, I responded clearly. It wasn't until the words were said that I realized I had. "No. I feed those who are still discovering the flavor of love in this way." It was not sharp. It wasn't mean. It simply was. Amelia entered through the entrance door that opened from the other side of the room. Once in culinary school, I had the most intense rival. The edges are now softer. She held a little folder and was anxious. She stood just short of the hostess stand and remarked, "I heard you're hiring prep cooks." I gave a nod. I responded softly, "If you bring your own recipes this time." With gratitude, and perhaps a hint of relief, she let out a breath. The night came to an end. I went back to the kitchen, where the scent of rosemary and lemon peel warmed the air. With a frame in her arm, Tessa entered the room. She claimed it arrived today. She gave me the black and white picture of me laughing. Flames rising from a pan beneath it, behind me, spoon in one hand. She had written, "Constructed out of the debris they left behind." After taking a deep breath, I put it close to the door so that visitors might see it. As they departed, they believed that the ticket would make all the difference. However, my life wasn't rebuilt by the money. That's when I realized I could get up without their consent. On a menu, the cake that no one desired had become the star dessert. To taste, they now formed a line. Story 6. Hello everyone. I apologize for disturbing your viewing, but kindly like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, from the delicate fairy lights that were tastefully strung across the lawn to the exquisitely placed bouquets of white lilies that adorned each table. I have spent weeks painstakingly organizing my engagement party with Chris. I was meant to have tonight, the night when I would finally be the center of attention. Olivia's brilliant personality cast a shadow over Rebecca Harris, the timid sister who was often ignored. As we stood in front of our guests, champagne flutes raised in the air, getting ready to make our announcement, Chris gave me a comforting grip on my hand and his soft smile steadied me. A recognizable clinking sound, Olivia's knife tapping persistently against her crystal glass, filled the air as Chris opened his lips to speak. As soon as my sister, who was naturally beautiful in her bright red dress, got up from her chair, a familiar uneasiness began to creep into my chest. She had a naughty twinkle in her eyes. I was all too familiar. My accomplishments since infancy have been eclipsed by the same light-hearted disobedience. Olivia said, "I'm sorry to interrupt your little moment," taking a theatrical pause to ensure she had everyone's full attention. "However, I have some really exciting news about Jason. I have a baby!" Around us gasps were heard, quickly followed by shouts, clapping, and happy laughing from friends and family who had turned their focus from my well-planned celebration to Olivia's unannounced news. The corners of her mouth curled upward into that recognizable grin as she turned to face me. "Sorry," she replied, her voice brimming with false regret. I guess I took center stage once more. The crowd erupted in laughter. My parents' happiness was evident and dazzlingly brilliant as they embraced Olivia with a big smile. Nevertheless, Chris and I remained motionless alone in the sphere of incredulity and annoyance that surrounded us. Impermeable, yet invisible. My meticulously planned moment, which was meant to finally legitimize years of silent sacrifices and underappreciated accomplishments, vanished in a matter of seconds as Olivia's easy charm engulfed me. I felt like an afterthought at my own celebration, because even Chris's mother hurried up to congratulate Olivia first. As the laughing erupted all around me, memories suddenly flooded my head, bringing back every instance from the past. This was exactly what Olivia had done. Olivia's entrance to her esteemed institution eclipsed my high school graduation, and the enthusiasm around her unexpected engagement announcement overshadowed my first art display. Even when I got my ideal job, Olivia's new house soon became the topic of talk at dinner. She subtly dominated my life, and this engagement party was just one more link in a lengthy chain. Chris tightened his grip on my hand once more, bringing me back to the here and now. His subdued rage reflected mine, his serene exterior barely masking the annoyance that burned behind his kind front. He leaned near, his breath warm on my cheek, whispering, "Give her this moment. We'll have ours soon enough." I felt the old animosity twisting uncomfortably within of me as I gazed at Olivia, beguiling everyone around her with ease and surrounded by admirers. Why did she have to take what should have been mine every time? What about my accomplishments and my joy that she just couldn't let show without her having to overshadow me? However, as my rage increased, a subtle yet potent notion kept creeping into my mind. It was subdued, graceful, but unquestionably powerful, the type of retaliation that would damage Olivia's dignity while seeming totally harmless to onlookers. With my voice calm, despite the excitement pumping through my veins, I edged closer to Chris. My lips curled into a smile as I muttered, "Let's send out the save the dates tomorrow." For once, the smile matched Olivia's self-assured smirk. "Let's alter them, though. Let's make sure Olivia knows what it's like to be overshadowed at last." As if he had been waiting for this flame to burn inside of me for years, Chris's eyebrows raised slightly before his face lit up with a knowing grin. He reassured me that he stood firmly by my side, prepared to contribute to our relationship, and he murmured back, "I love you," with pride and something more in his voice. Unaware of the silent resolve that was growing between Chris and myself, the guests continued to speak and celebrate Olivia's announcement as the party went on. Olivia gave us a fleeting glance, her eyes glimmering with pride, confident that she had once again won. However, I made a resolute pledge to myself that this time would be different. Olivia would feel overshadowed, outwitted, and forgotten this time. I would finally be in the spotlight this time. The next morning, as I sat drinking my tepid coffee and planning our next course of action with Chris, the calm of our kitchen stood in stark contrast to the tumultuous emotional hangover still reverberating within my mind. Sunlight softly splashed upon the pale wooden table covered with half-written vengeance scenarios and drafts of save-the-date cards scrawled in my sloppy handwriting as it passed through the sheer white drapes. Some of these suggestions, such as planning the wedding around Olivia's birthday or intentionally misspelling her name on the invitation, were ridiculously trivial. Small gestures that made me laugh for a while, but felt empty and disappointing in the end. After reading one of my more juvenile ideas that I had written at 3 in the morning, Chris smiled gently, shook his head in loving amazement, crumpled it up, and skillfully tossed it into the overflowing trash can. After hours of iterations, we eventually created something nuanced, but thought-provoking and unclear. Remember the date. Intended to purposefully regain the attention Olivia had so easily taken away from me, not merely to reclaim our moment. We carefully considered which day would set off the ideal emotional storm. Olivia's due date was just 1 week away, and we knew that her insatiable bordering on pathological curiosity would compel her to learn about our plans. As a result, she couldn't help but take a glance at our announcement before anybody else did. I had a wave of exhilaration and nervousness after sending the cards to the printer, and I briefly doubted myself before Chris gave me a comforting shoulder squeeze. He gently smiled while brushing a stray hair behind my ear and said, "Relax," in my ear. "She's tired of being treated this way. It is now your chance to speak last." 2 days later, the peaceful rhythm of our breakfast was interrupted by the harsh, furious ringing of my phone. Olivia's name appeared in bold, angry characters on the screen. I paused for a moment, taking courage from Chris's unwavering stare, and then I picked up the phone and carefully pressed it to my ear, preparing for the impending storm. "Are you crazy?" Olivia's voice erupted instantly, every syllable pierced with hatred as her words were entangled in incredulity and indignation. "Did you really choose that day specifically? You are aware that my due date is just 1 week away." Even though her rage was strangely pleasurable and a sign that my well-crafted message had struck the right spot, I still pretended to be politely perplexed and spoke cautiously. "Harmless. What date do you mean by your due date exactly?" "It was precisely 9 months after your announcement, if I recall correctly." "Correct. There should be enough time to prevent any disputes." Olivia saw my ridiculous arithmetic error during the brief quiet on the line. Her due date would naturally be considerably earlier because she had, of course, revealed her pregnancy long after the fertilization. I was aware that the error would be readily apparent, maybe eliciting some humorous remarks from our friends on my mathematical prowess, but more significantly, generating interest and responses to ensure that no one could overlook my point. Olivia swiftly recovered her calm, the hatred in her voice evident, and hissed furiously, "Oh, please! You are well aware of my baby's due date, and you purposefully choose that day to spoil my special occasion. You're attempting to ruin the best moment of my life." "Sabotage," I said calmly, listening to the faint shudder of real pain beneath her rage, and momentarily questioning whether I had gone a bit too far this time. But then my engagement party memories came flooding back. As Olivia luxuriated in the attention she had so ruthlessly taken from me, I felt humiliated and heard vicious laughter reverberating about me. I inhaled deeply and examined myself, gathering all the courage I had suppressed for years of silent bitterness. "Olivia, isn't that funny?" I spoke calmly and carefully, relishing the strong sensation of control that swept over me. "Who is stealing now? Who is in the spotlight?" I could almost see her surprised face as the connection fell eerily silent, and I could picture the angry tears welling up in her eyes. Chris watched me closely from across the table, his eyes steady, but questioning, silently asking if I was truly comfortable with how far this had gone. Olivia had always assumed her position as the family favorite was secure, unquestionable, and never once suspected that I might dare to step out of my assigned role as passive supporter to challenge her. For a brief while, there was a heavy stillness between us, full with unspoken words, defenses, and accusations that were just out of reach and ready to break the tenuous calm. Olivia's shaky, shallow breathing betrayed the fragility she never let others see. Perhaps too late, I realized that retribution wasn't as sweet as I had thought it would be, and my heart squeezed at the sound. Olivia quickly ended the conversation while I paused, leaving me with nothing but a void and unresolved questions. I carefully put the phone down, wondering if I had finally won the battle or had just started one that I wasn't ready to fight, and felt the weight of my actions fall heavily on my shoulders. In the days after Olivia's irate phone call, rumors started to circulate among our relatives, dividing cousins, aunts, and uncles into opposing factions. While some vehemently supported my right to reclaim my moment, others angrily criticized my choice to hold the wedding so near Olivia's due date. Every whispered discussion seemed heavy with criticism, stress, and subliminal charges, and all of a sudden, every encounter became into a possible altercation, which left me feeling both alone and empowered. With flimsy attempts at mediation, hollow assurances, and thinly veiled requests that I'd just apologize and reschedule my phone was buzzing nonstop. Every word cloaked in cheesy civility failed to conceal its actual meaning. That Olivia's sentiments should once more take precedence over mine. When Olivia publicly posted on social media about her severe stress and emotional distress, claiming it could affect her pregnancy, the fallout escalated dramatically. This brave move immediately drew waves of sympathy from family members who rushed to her side, offering her reassuring platitudes and heartfelt support. Her writings, which were full of well-chosen words, meant to evoke strong emotions, quickly portrayed me as heartless, self-centered, and even cruel, solidifying her role as the hapless victim and painting me as the bad guy. However, in spite of the harsh reactions, relatives who ought to have known better kept coming in. A tremendous sense of justification drove me to obstinately stick with my choice, hoping that Olivia wouldn't overwhelm me for once. However, Rebecca explains, nothing prepared me for the call from my mother, whose gentle yet unyielding voice easily triggered decades-old insecurity, cutting straight to my core. How were you able to? She started off with a tone that was laden with guilt, subtly accusatory, and exaggerated disappointment. Olivia's pregnancy is fragile, as you are aware. How could you purposefully give her this much worry on a day so near to her due date? Even I was shocked by my own reaction and the sheer passion that went into it. So I laughed bitterly. Mom, really? I felt years of repressed rage simmering perilously near the surface as I snapped back, my voice trembling a little. I'm still the villain, even after Olivia purposefully humiliates me in front of everyone by announcing her pregnancy during my engagement party. You've always been prejudiced. Do you even realize that the line was filled with my mother's agonizing stillness, which was heavy with anguish? However, spurred by the bottled-up rage, I moved forward instead of backing down like I usually do, breaking free at last. Olivia has eclipsed every significant event in my life, and each and every time you watched in silence. I never once acknowledged my feelings. She was always your favorite and your star. I was only an idea after the fact. My mother, obviously shocked and uneasy by my infrequent outburst, said hesitantly and tremblingly, "You know that's not true." She was anxious to maintain a story in which she was innocent. Even though I've always loved you equally, her phony assurance simply made me more resentful, which made my response harsher than I had intended. You loved me just as much. Yes, Mother, I said sarcastically, my tone rough and nasty. You sobbed when she announced her engagement, and hardly blinked when I did the same. That's why you casually forgot about mine while throwing lavish dinner parties to honor each of her promotions. My feelings have never been as important as Olivia's. Don't dispute it. With every second that went by, the emotional gap between us grew wider. It was another long, agonizing quiet, full of a lifetime of unspoken truths and hidden grudges. At last, my mother's voice was tiny and unsure, nearly whispering. Rebecca, I'm sorry you feel that way. I didn't want for you to feel hated, but her apology sounded hollow and inadequate, incapable of mending the decades-old scars or bridging the emotional divide. Although I knew deep down that this conversation had been required, hanging up the phone left me exhausted, exposed, and terrified. The weight of our tense relationship was bearing down on me. A long overdue admission of fact that we had both disregarded. Even Chris saw the shift, putting his arms around me tenderly every night in an attempt to comfort me, while his eyes showed signs of mounting nervousness and subtly asking me to think about letting go for the sake of harmony. Perhaps you've made your point, he said carefully in a whisper. His steady voice had a faint note of dissatisfaction one evening, suggesting that even he was feeling the effects of this continuous struggle. Maybe it's time to let it go and go on without enduring this suffering any longer. Even though I knew he meant well, and that his kind comments were the result of sincere concern, I was nonetheless deeply irritated by them. I was frustrated that even my staunchest ally Chris suddenly advised me to back off. Was I really supposed to keep quiet again? I have to swallow my emotions and let Olivia in again. My phone rang loudly before I could reply, breaking the tension between us, as the screen brightened with quickly arriving alerts. Olivia had once again made a dramatic and public statement in which she claimed that I had always disliked having her in our family, subtly implying a more sinister reality. Everyone, including me, was left astonished and perplexed, looking blankly at the provocative message blazing violently on the screen, after her words sent shockwaves through our family, causing frenetic conversations and endless analysis. My pulse pounded with anxiety as I frantically wondered what secret Olivia might possibly divulge that I was unaware of. A secret so potent that it threatened to shatter all my preconceived notions about my own family. Olivia's cryptic clues stoked my interest, which soon turned into an obsession that took up every free moment of my day. I was determined to learn more about our family's complex past in order to uncover the truth hidden under layers of meticulously crafted tales. I spent days going through ancient family albums, dusty boxes containing school diplomas, childhood artwork, and long-forgotten diaries that were kept in our parents' attic. Every item of memorabilia I came across revealed tidbits of information I never would have predicted. A startling pattern soon became apparent among fading photos and scribbled notes, revealing something I had completely missed my whole life. Olivia's bright charisma and easy popularity belied deep-seated concerns that had been boiling under her self-assured exterior for years. It became evident to me as I went over our academic records and other honors how frequently our parents had disparaged Olivia in comparison to me. Teacher-written notes on report cards and letters home, always emphasizing my accomplishments, but subtly implying Olivia's difficulties. Olivia's lively personality had always seemed unwavering, but it seems that she spent a large portion of our childhood in silence, fighting feelings of inadequacy that were overshadowed by my academic achievement and the quiet discipline qualities our parents publicly praised. Olivia never realized how much their subtle comparisons had hurt my sister. I struggled with the thought that the sister I had always viewed as self-assured and favored had actually felt just as inferior and overshadowed as I had, and learning these secrets left me feeling oddly terrible. Determined to confront Olivia about this, I arranged up a meeting at her favorite cafe, a neutral location that seemed absurd considering our turbulent past. As Olivia walked in, clearly agitated and ready for a fight, I pointed clumsily to the seat across from me, trying to seem humorous. "Olivia, calm down. No snatching of the limelight today, I swear. Just two dysfunctional sisters enjoying coffee." I tried to be funny, but Olivia rolled her eyes and laughed harshly, weakening my attempt. "Excellent. Sincerely, M2 is preparing for drama today." She let out a sigh, the tinge of her typical sarcasm, offering a momentary but welcome respite from the tension that still pervaded our relationship. "I suppose you would find it humorous, since drama is my area of expertise." Beneath the layers of bitterness and miscommunication that had recently characterized our conversations, I felt a glimmer of the old sisterly banter and smiled faintly. "It's funny how we always thought the worst of one other," I said softly as I looked her in the eye. While going through old family belongings, I discovered certain things that shocked me. Olivia's eyebrows furrowed as I began to carefully lay out the painful facts that Heidi had revealed, outlining the subtle but ongoing comparisons our parents had unintentionally made that shaped our ideas of ourselves and each other. Olivia was fascinated but hesitant. Initially listening in silence, Olivia's countenance was a complex blend of humiliation, despair, and rage, all of which were obviously at odds with one another and threatened to overpower her carefully maintained poise. Olivia's shields finally gave down a little, and she leaned forward, her voice tinged with unvarnished honesty. "You don't understand, Rebecca," she said sourly, her eyes glimmering with hardly contained tears. "You have always had skill, knowledge, and respect from everyone, including Chris, who genuinely loves you. Being entertaining, well-liked, and the person that everyone liked at gatherings was all I ever had. However, I knew in my heart that I would never be able to compare to you in any significant manner. I was shocked by the intensity of real suffering underlying her statements, which made me reevaluate my preconceptions about her ostensibly easy existence. Olivia." I let out a little sigh, fighting to maintain my composure as guilt instead of victory suddenly overcame me. Olivia interjected, shaking her head fiercely and her voice vibrating with unfiltered anger. All this time, I thought you purposefully overshadowed me because you enjoyed seeing me struggle, she said. No, it wasn't about you that I announced my pregnancy at your celebration. It was my frantic, self-centered endeavor to be unique and to have a success of my own that no one could disparage in comparison to yours. Horrible, huh? I responded with ironic humor to cover up my inner weakness, and I chuckled bitterly as the ridiculousness of our lifetime miscommunication suddenly became apparent. We are both aware that insecurities are our family's expertise. Perhaps we need to give our parents credit for making treatment a permanent requirement. Olivia gave a sincere if little grin as she sighed deeply and reclined in her chair, obviously worn out by the weight of our discoveries. Rebecca said in a low voice, I don't know if we can ever fully move past this, Rebecca, in a somber and thoughtful tone. There have been too many years of animosity between us. The reality in her statement made my heart sink, and I instantly realized how pointless my retaliation had been. The joy I had expected was replaced with a sobering realization of the emotional price we had both paid. I gave her a hesitant nod, comprehending her hesitancy, and wondering if the harm we had caused could be repaired or buried. Beneath our resentment was the tenuous prospect of recovery. Olivia's face changed suddenly before I could reply. Darkening a little, her eyes narrowing suddenly with passion, her voice falling conspiratorially. Rebecca, she said warily, her tone tinged with apprehension. You ought to be aware of something else as well. Mom always knew this. Something about you. She skipped uneasily and never shared my emotions. Olivia's cryptic statements caused me to become immediately uneasy and anxious for answers, making me doubt everything I had ever thought about my family and myself. I felt a sharp rise in confusion and fear. Sleep remained impossible in the days after Olivia's disturbing disclosure, as an unrelenting dread twisted my stomach into painful knots and pushed me in the direction of the awkward conversation I knew I could no longer avoid. As I approached the familiar porch in the evening, I picked a time when I knew my mother would be by herself, sipping tea quietly in the soft glow of her favorite reading lamp. Anxiety tightened around me like a heavy cloak, making each step up the stairs harder than the last, weighted by years of unspooling resentments and newly discovered uncertainties. My mother answered the door slowly, obviously aware of the seriousness of my unexpected visit. Her eyes were cautious and apprehensive, but they couldn't hide the intense maternal tenderness beneath her tense face. She motioned me inside, and the door closed softly behind us, the click resonating through the house with a finality that unnerved us both, and meant that whatever secrets lay between us were about to permanently change our family. My pulse was racing as I sat across from her, and my bravery wavered for a second, before regaining it and asking the question that had been bothering me for days. My voice cracked a little beneath the intensity. Olivia implied that you've kept something significant about me a secret all of my life, Mom. Tell me what's happening, please. My mother was obviously struggling with a lifetime of grief and shame, as her eyes immediately filled with tears, her shoulders quivering slightly as she gripped her teacup hard, her knuckles becoming white from the emotional strain. At last, she drew a trembling breath, her voice weak and frail as she spoke quietly, picking words carefully as if they were all too heavy. Rebecca, you had a twin sister at birth, a lovely and ideal little girl we called Elizabeth. She died soon after, leaving a hole in our hearts from which we never fully healed. It was impossible for me to properly register her words, let alone comprehend the implications that lay behind them. As my breath caught in my throat, and my astonished disbelief mixed uncomfortably with the anguish and uncertainty that instantly overcame me. My mother persisted shakily, making a valiant effort to keep everything under control, but it was obvious that she was battling with the reality that she had concealed for decades under layers of tactful quiet. We were almost ruined by the loss. Rebecca's absence tormented your father and me, and we thought we would never be able to get over our grief. Olivia restored hope and pleasure to our family when she entered our lives through adoption. However, the thought of her ever feeling alienated was too much for us to handle. We told ourselves it was best for you both, so we kept the truth from you. The room swung slightly about me as the realization of this fact sent a shockwave through my heart, leaving me feeling lightheaded and confused. I was overcome with grief for a sister I had never knew existed, and sympathy for the mother whose unseen suffering influenced so many of our decisions. But before I could say anything, we were both shocked by a sudden cry from behind. We turned swiftly to see Olivia standing motionless in the corridor, her face white. Her emotions contorted with a mix of anguish, amazement, and beginning understanding. Olivia had been whispering hoarsely the entire time, her voice laden with sadness and terrible disbelief, tears already silently running down her cheeks. My fears weren't unique to me. You also didn't tell me about this. You gave me the impression that Rebecca detested me because I was just insufficient, but in fact, I was always attempting to fill the impossibly large gap left by Elizabeth. In a desperate attempt to win Olivia's forgiveness, my mother wept gently and reached out to her. However, Olivia flinched back, shaking her head angrily, overcome by a lifetime of abruptly redefining ties and emotions. Instead, she turned to face me, her eyes beseeching me to understand silently, pleading with me to affirm that she was still my sister. Our parents' well-meaning deceit had unintentionally created emotional isolation. Tears obstructing my eyes, I approached Olivia and gently grasped her shaking hand. The touch of her palm felt both familiar and somehow unfamiliar, as if we were now seeing each other fully. "Olivia," I said, my voice full of sincere passion, "you've been my sister forever. I apologize. We both misunderstood one another for a very long time." She squeezed my hand tightly and nodded softly. The shaky prospect of reconciliation hasn't yet been authentically infused into our hesitant embrace. Even yet, we both understood that it would take time and attention for our shared wounds to completely heal. Our mother, who was obviously divided between relief and guilt, as she watched us, sobbed quietly, thankful that her daughters may find peace, but yet heartbroken by the harm caused by decades of silence. In the weeks that followed, Chris and I carefully rethought our wedding preparations, deciding to recognize our true love and celebrate our own personalities, rather than being driven by competitiveness or retaliation. Each of us fought to get our save-the-date back. Spotlight the theft, which had been used as a weapon against Olivia, now represented my freedom from familial concerns, and my bold entry into a future characterized by individual authenticity, rather than continual comparison. At the last fitting for my wedding gown, I stood silently next to Olivia, our reflections blending together in the mirror. I was surprisingly at ease after realizing how intricately self-worth and family competition interact to shape each of us in both obvious and subtle ways. Our tentative, wary, but hopeful hug was a realization that in spite of our disagreements, miscommunications, and emotional wounds, our sisterly tie was sincere and strong, able to withstand even the most trying circumstances. When I honestly thought back on this path, I realized that reconciliation was neither straightforward nor comprehensive. It took constant work and vulnerability, tolerance for flaws, and the guts to face unpleasant realities head-on in order to be really forgiven. However, I knew that we had made the first important steps toward healing when we stood together as sisters bound by secrets, wounds, and at last, true understanding. We had moved past our shared past and into an uncertain but hopeful future, which caused everyone, including myself, to think carefully about their own lives and unresolved relationships.